Okay, this is chapter 6, part 3. Keep going here. So we have, as far as pressure goes and microbes, the barophiles exist under very high pressures. They range from a few times to over 1,000 times the pressure of the atmosphere. These bacteria are so strictly adapted to high pressures that they will rupture when exposed to normal atmospheric pressure. So you can imagine that these guys are going to probably be found at the bottom of the ocean. Excuse me. Alright, so strong partnerships, symbiosis. So symbiosis is a general term to denote a situation in which two organisms live together in a close partnership. So we have three main types of symbiosis, and you need to know these. Be sure to be able to define these and maybe even give an example if there's anything in the book on that. So we have mutualism. Organisms live in an obligatory but mutually beneficial relationship. Commensalism is when the partner called the commensal receives benefits while its partner is neither harmed nor benefited. And a parasitism is a relationship in which the host organism provides a parasitic microbe with nutrients and a habitat, and the host then suffers from that relationship. Antagonism is an association between free-living species that arise when members of a community compete. So antibiosis is the production of inhibitory compounds, such as antibiotics, into the surrounding environment that inhibit or destroy another microbe in the same habitat. The first microbe has a competitive advantage by increasing the space and nutrients available to it. This is common in the soil, where mixed communities of microbes compete for space and food. Synergism. This is an interrelationship between two organisms that benefits them but is not necessary for survival. So together the participants cooperate to produce a result that neither could do alone. So gum disease, dental caries, and some bloodstream infections involve mixed infections that are examples of bacteria that interact synergistically. And the epitome of a synergistic relationship is a biofilm. And a biofilm is a mixed community of bacteria and other microbes that are attracted to a surface and each other. Basically, there's an initial colonizer, and it calls on all these other microbes, and they kind of bind together and cause havoc on whatever the cell is that is being colonized. So attached cells are stimulated to release chemicals as the cell population grows. So these guys are kind of like an army of bacteria, where one single bacteria maybe isn't going to do any damage, but when you put this bacteria together with a bunch of other types, then we have a problem. So these are steps in a biofilm formation. I would expect you to read through this and kind of get an idea of what happens here. So we have several steps here. Somehow I have the same slide twice, so I'll just skip over that one. So bacteria in biofilms behave and respond very differently than free-living bacteria. So each individual type of bacteria that lives separately outside of a biofilm is going to respond differently than when you put all of them together. So there's different genes that are activated when they're acting as a group. So they are very hard to kill, and they're going to be more common in, especially when you have things implanted in a patient. These are going to be more likely to develop biofilms. Binary fission. So you need to know what this is. This is basically when the cells, one cell becomes two. Okay, and how does this happen? What is binary fission? The parent cell enlarges, it duplicates its chromosomes, starts to pull its envelope together to the center of the cell, and then the cell wall eventually forms a complete central septum, and then you end up with two cells. So it's one cell becoming two, those two cells becoming four, and so on and so on and so on. And in your book there's a picture, and I think I have it here, how this happens. So I would expect you to be able to explain this to me, or maybe even draw it out on the test. There's not a whole lot to this, pretty straightforward, so be sure to know this. Rate of population growth, so generation time or doubling time. So this is the time required for a complete fission cycle. So we go back a slide here, a complete from 1 to 2 cells, that's a cell, that's a fission cycle. So a generation is basically when we increase the population by a factor of 2. So when one parent cell becomes 2 cells, that's 1 generation. And when those 2 cells become 4 cells, that's another generation. So as long as the environment remains favorable, the doubling effect can continue at a constant rate. So the length of generation time is a measure of the growth rate of an organism. So the average is 30 to 60 minutes. The shortest can be 10 to 12 minutes. Mycobacterium leprae has a generation time of 10 to 30 days. So it can be very short, it can be very long. Environmental bacteria have generation times that are measured in months, and most pathogens have a relatively short generation time. So the bugs that are going to affect patients, that are going to affect us, have a short generation time. And here is a lovely little kind of picture to kind of show you how that goes. I'm not going to test you on that specifically. So determining the population growth curve. A growth curve is a predictable pattern of a bacterial population growth in a closed system. And we can measure it by placing a couple of cells, or a tiny number of cells, into a sterile liquid medium. Then we incubate it over a period of several hours, and then we take samples of that broth at regular intervals. We're going to plate each of those samples onto solid media, and then we're going to count those colonies to see how many's growing, and that gives us a growth curve. Alright, so there's steps in viable plate count. This is exactly what I just described. So be able to draw it out and paraphrase each step in the next 3 slides. I believe this is on page 169, figure 6.11, as far as the growth curve coming up here. So, stages of the normal growth curve. We have the lag phase. So this is a flat period of growth due to basically the cells are just acclimating to the container, to the system that they've been put into. So newly inoculated cells that require a period of adjustment, enlargement, and synthesis. So they're kind of just, oh my gosh, we're in a new house, we need to get situated here, right? The cells are not yet multiplying at their maximum rate. There may be some that are multiplying, but not a huge amount of growth yet. And the population of cells is so sparse or dilute that sampling may actually miss them. So the first stage in the normal growth curve is referred to as the lag phase, and you need to tell me what that means. Like, why is it referred to as the lag phase? It's because those cells are getting acclimated to their new environment. Step 2 is the exponential growth phase, also known as the logarithmic or log phase. This is when that growth curve increases geometrically. So this will continue as long as the cells have adequate nutrients and the environment is favorable. So this is going to be when most growth occurs for the microbes. And when I say growth, I just want to clarify, I'm not talking about the cell itself getting bigger. I mean the generations. You know, we go from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. So we get more and more cells that are developing. The third step is the stationary growth phase. Basically, cell birth and cell death rates are equal. That cell division rate is slowing down, and basically what this is caused from is because we are depleting the nutrients and the oxygen, and they're making a mess of their new house, of their container that they're in, right? So just like a fish tank needs to be cleaned periodically because they kind of mess that up, their excretion, what they excrete is kind of making a mess of their environment. Refer to them as pollutants. The death phase, which is the last phase that I'll expect you to draw out for me on this. The cells begin to die at an exponential rate due to the buildup of wastes. So the speed in which death occurs depends on the resistance of the species and how toxic the conditions are. And this happens at a bit of a slower rate than that growth phase. The viable non-culturable state is when many cells in a culture in the death phase stay alive but are dormant. So these will not grow on culture medium and are missed in colony counts. So sometimes, because they are alive but they're unable to multiply. All right, so this is that growth curve drawn out. So here's our lag phase. Okay, we put our bacteria in this culture tube, and it's got to get acclimated, so it's not really any major growth going on. When we get to the exponential growth phase, we get it's like baby booming, right? Tons and tons and tons of growth, lots and lots of multiplication of bacteria. So this happens at a very high rate here at the exponential growth phase. Then we kind of plateau off, right? We got some stuff, starting to die a little bit, but really it's kind of just stuck in this stationary phase. And then at the death phase, basically the death rate is way higher than the birth rate. So there are some cells remaining viable, but for the most part, there's not much left in there that is really usable. So you need to know this. You're going to want to draw it out and explain it to me. Alright, so the practical importance of the growth curve. Tendency for populations to exhibit phases of rapid growth, slow growth, and death has implications on microbial control, food microbiology, and culture technology. So microbes in the exponential growth phase are more vulnerable to being treated by antimicrobial agents and heat, so they're easier to kill. Actively growing cells are more vulnerable to conditions that disrupt the metabolism and binary fission cycles. And then a person actively shedding bacteria in the early and middle stages of infection is way more likely to spread that disease than in the later stages. Alright, so I'm going to try to get through the last bit of this PowerPoint before I turn this off. So, turbidity and turbidometry. It's a clear nutrient solution when it becomes turbid or cloudy as microbes grow in it. So the greater the turbidity, the larger the population size. In other words, the greater the turbidity, the more bacteria that's in there that's growing, right? And you can see some pictures. So this one has low turbidity, and this one has high turbidity. So there's going to be a lot more microbes in this one. And this is something that we use in the lab sometimes to actually determine whether or not we have a certain amount of microbes in there. So ways of analyzing population size without culturing, without taking the time of culturing. We can count it, we can measure it microscopically, we can use a culture counter, which is electronically scans a fluid as it passes through a tiny pipette. There's flow cytometry, works similar to a culture counter, but can measure cell size and differentiate between live and dead cells. And then of course there's PCR, which is a type of genetic probing. And we quantify bacteria and other organisms present in the environment or the samples. This is just some pictures of what I just went over, and that's it. So that's the end of Chapter 6. So I hope you move on to Chapter 7, and don't forget to do your online homework.